you hate me after all I say?
Can't put it off any longer. Good morning and welcome. You are tuned in and listening to Back Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. Happy Friday, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a long week. It's been a busy week, but we made it. We made it to Friday. We've got a big show today. First up, we're going to talk some fantasy football and how we got started in the business and some of the things going on at Inside the Pylon with my buddy Doug Moore, who, along with me, is going to be writing about fantasy football and some other things at Inside the Pylon this upcoming NFL season. It was a great pleasure to sit down and chit-chat with him. Excuse me. And then in our second hour, episode 3, I believe it is, of Chopping It Up with Matt and Sharona. I sat down with my good buddy Matt Wood. This is a series that Matt and I have been doing, and we got a chance to sit down on Thursday night, last night, and talk about privacy in the internet age, kind of a big topic now, sort of ties into a little bit of a theme for what we've been talking about over, the past few weeks. We did a show last Friday that was sort of dedicated to Gawker and the sale that was finally accomplished. Gawker has sold its subblogs to Univision, and Univision is going to continue the great work that that they do there. And but Gawker.com is going to be defunct. It's going to cease operations. So, kind of sad times. We talked about that in pretty good detail last Friday, and Matt and I talk a little bit about Peter Thiel. Now, we mispronounced his name. I think we were calling him Peter Thiel. It's actually pronounced Thiel. I had to jump on YouTube real quick this morning and learn how to pronounce his name, as well as Ryan Lochte. We're going to talk about Ryan Lochte too, and also in just a few minutes, I'm going to touch upon this Josh Brown situation and compare it to Ryan Lochte. But it was fun to sit down with Matt. I'm very excited to bring that to you guys. So let's see. The Gawker sale, though, it looks like they bought Gawker Media out of bankruptcy for $135 million, which was a significant increase from what another media company had bid for at $90 million. So, but I mean, it's good though if you celebrate, and you should, if you celebrate independent media. That Gawker is going to live on in some fashion is good. I'm hopeful that things won't change too much. You never do know. Univision wants to. Everybody wants that millennial. That millennial audience, that millennial, those clicks and what have you. And it's understandable. You want to. You want to be successful and make money, and making money, you're able to pay your writers and reporters and what have you. Yet on the other hand, and we've talked about this on the show before, it's also troublesome in a way, because it's like the cart leading the horse instead of the other way around. Instead of common sense and decency and what have you leading the way, it often seems to be the other way around. But I digress a little bit. So we'll do that in the second hour and talk a lot more about, we're going to talk about Juanita Broderick and the difficulty in choosing. Listen, I understand. We've talked on this show. I understand, the issues with Hillary Clinton. I do. Hillary Rodham Clinton. We're going to talk about Juanita Broderick. I've been meaning to do that. Probably the first of several discussions about that. I'm going to talk about Amy Schumer. I wrote a little blurb about Amy Schumer and some things that are going on with her. We're going to talk about sports, today. By the way, big news this morning. You would assume that it should become big news. I don't know. We seem to be focused on Ryan Lochte's statement, which I looked at it and was like, okay, well, that's okay, kind of standard. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Ray Lewis's son, Ray Anthony Lewis III, has been indicted on a charge of criminal sexual conduct. This was in South Carolina, Conway, South Carolina. Allegedly, he engaged in non-consensual sex with an 18-year-old female who says she was incapacitated due to the use of drugs or alcohol. In the here we are, August the 19th, in the year of our Lord 2016, and apparently we still don't understand that if someone is unconscious or drunk or incapacitated by drugs, that we probably shouldn't have sex with them. But here we are, and talking about these things hopefully will lead to changes. We'll continue to follow this story. Predictably, they deny that happened and said that the sex was consensual. We'll see how that how that does transpire, what ends up happening with that. But I want to talk about Josh Brown, and it's interesting. Friend of mine sent me a message this morning. I sort of kind of slept in. I was so tired. I had my alarm set for 7:30, and I kept hitting the snooze button. I was like, because I prepared. I was up late last night, and I prepared for the show, and I knew, what what I was going to do, and I had the music, for the most part, I had the music all set, and so I could do that. I didn't have to worry too much about it. So I was like, I'm going to sleep in. So I woke up to a message from a friend of mine who said, that this Josh Brown stuff was horrible. And, my response was, well, yeah, but it's not really even a blip on my radar. Everybody's all concerned about Ryan Lochte, who may or may not have, pointed a gun. There may have been what it sounds like was extortion, right? I mean, Ryan Lochte probably did something really bad, peeing on, I'm aware that there's video, peeing on, destruction of property in Rio, where he was competing in the Olympics, and that's a bad thing to do. And he and some friends were out acting like a bunch of punks, a bunch of nimrods, and peed on someone's property. And it sounds like they were that monetary recompense was demanded on the spot, and there were guns involved, and what have you. It's it's kind of a distasteful story, but it's getting a lot of press on my timeline, whereas the Josh Brown story is barely a blip. Hardly anybody talking about it. We don't want to talk about domestic violence. We don't want to talk about rape. We don't want to talk about violence against women. We're tired of it. It's, ladies, we gave you your 15 minutes. Go back to the kitchen. Take your shoes off. Cook us some damn food. We don't want to talk about this. We don't want to, we don't want to hear that Josh Brown, in his relationship with his now ex-wife, allegedly committed over 20 incidents of violence against her, some of it while she was pregnant with their child. The NFL has responded in perhaps predictable manner by issuing only a one-game suspension. Hey, it's too bad that there wasn't video of all this, huh? Infamously, the NFL issued a one-game suspension to Ray Rice until that video surfaced, and it was like, ooh, well, everybody's kind of seeing what this is all about, what it's like to to see a football player strike his significant other, and this is bad, and we should always apologizing after the fact. By the way, we're going to talk about the Al Jazeera 4 here in a minute, but it's frustrating because just when you think progress is being made, just when you think that, maybe sort of kind of the NFL is going to get its poop together and, start to, apply some consistency. I suppose it is consistent if you look at the original punishment that was handed down to, to Ray Rice. But yeah, as troubling as that is, perhaps the more troubling aspect of it, all things are local, and the new Giants head coach came out and said, Ben McAdoo came out and said early on in the year that they a no tolerance policy. It's amazing how those no tolerance policies turn into, well, we didn't know, and it's not me. Look at him. Ask Josh Brown about this. But he said that there was a no tolerance policy. Yet his latest comments were, "I stay in my lane, and you should ask Josh Brown about this." And well, he's still a Giant, and that no tolerance policy is complete and utter bull hockey. And it's we say this on the show a lot. People like to talk and say things, but what they do says everything. And it looks like Ben McAdoo you can put him on that list of people who say one thing and do another. So yeah, it's troubling, but it's unfortunately not hardly surprising that here we are. And despite everyone saying, we're going to renewed attention and concern regarding violence against women, we still don't care. We're far more concerned about Ryan Lochte's very vanilla statement, which, if I were advising him, I would have said, okay, that's about what you should do. It's not over. I know that finally some of the other swimmers were able to pay money. Money does seem to make the world go around, does it not? Pay money and leave the country. At this point, with things still kind of up in the air, it would be legally, it would be incredibly stupid for him to cop to anything or to admit to anything. But people seem to be wanting him to do that. I don't know. It's it's kind of crazy, but that's the kind of thing that gets attention. That's the kind of thing that seems to get attention. So all right. So real quick, because we want to play Doug's segment, and then we'll follow up from that and go into our second hour. But the Al Jazeera 4, it's another interesting deal. I have mixed emotions. We're going to get my buddy Josh Taylor to come on the show, and we're going to talk about this because, I sit back and I don't really have a dog in the fight. My thought process on drug testing, PEDs, and what have you has really undergone a revolution over the course of the past 10 years or so, 15 years or so. And yeah, I watch and I see, painkillers and injections and all of these things that these guys do to stay on the field. And I just, it's very hard for me to get outraged over, HGH, which may, help. Probably doesn't have much in the way of performance enhancing in terms of making you that much stronger, faster, or whatever, but it might help in rehabilitation, getting you back on the field quicker. And we act like these are bad things, whereas we don't seem to have that same level of concern about things, about teams giving pain pills out like it's Skittles, like it's candy. I'm actually surprised someone hasn't taken the Marshawn Lynch Skittle thing and substituted pain pills and made some sort of meme out of it. But anyway, so it's just interesting. But it does look like three of the Al Jazeera four are going to sit down and chit chat with the commissioner, which is what I would have advised them to do to begin with. I mean, I understand that there are legitimate concerns about is that enough? But listen, I dare any of you, if if someone and and I know that this report was discredited, but and we're talking about a major news source. Al Jazeera is a major news source. And I dare any of you, if Al Jazeera were to do a story on you and your boss came to you and said, hey, look, man, I know this is probably bullshit, but we need to just let's talk about it, clear it up, and put it behind us. I dare any of you to say, hell no, I'm not going to do that. Here, let me send you a letter. See what that gets you. Just see what that gets you. It'll probably get you a pink slip, is what that'll get you. So, it's kind of interesting that, and listen, there's no question but that, and I said it's so funny because going back, back when the new CBA, that was what, 2012, and everybody was praising the new CBA and, oh, look at all this money and everything. And I was like, well, it's not that great, I mean, look at all the power that and he already had it. They just didn't, do anything about it. Does the disciplinary system need to be tweaked? Absolutely. I said it then. I've said it consistently since then. It absolutely needs to be tweaked. But that is a collective bargaining thing. And my concern is that I see these guys being used as pawns in waging a battle that they cannot win, and James Harrison, listen, Mr. Harrison, I would watch if your interview with Roger Goodell and his cronies were televised. Heck yeah, I'd watch that, man. And I understand you probably don't have anything to hide, and I believe that. Listen, I believe you. I believe you don't have anything to hide, and if you don't, sit down with them and do it, and now you're going to do it, and and hopefully that will be the end of it. But I see these guys being used as pawns, and how and the NFL absolutely can suspend them for not cooperating. They have a right to investigate these things. Point blank, period. They have that right. You need to get over that. If you're getting your collective underoos in a wad over that, you need to get over it. They've got that right. And so, how many more games does he have? How many more games? And maybe James Harrison is fine, letting his career end like that. But I don't think so. I don't think that he is. And I want to see him on the field as much as anybody else because I'm a big fan of old man football. And what he's able to do at this stage, and Julius Peppers as well. It's, I'm team old man football, and I want to see these guys on the field, and it really doesn't serve their interests not to at least sit down. And so I'm happy to see that. Mike Neal may fight it. He's not going to be playing anymore anyway, so he doesn't have as much to lose. He doesn't have those games to lose, and I'm fine with that too. If he wants to fight it, I think he's fighting a losing battle. But this is a collective bargaining thing, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. What are these players going to be willing to give up if, in fact, the NFL is even willing to give up any of its power? They don't have to give it up. You've already given it away. You gave it away twice now. Theoretically, what would you be willing to give up to get any of that back? And I don't know. And I understand, public pressure, but I don't, listen, I think Roger Goodell has shown very much a willingness to absorb some of these, these PR hits, and pretty soon we'll see a rehabilitation, blitz from in the media regarding him too. I'm relatively certain, which is a great way to say we're going to be talking about Nate Parker and how Hollywood tries to hide sex scandals in our second hour, but um, we simply, it's pretty interesting if like me, you like to sit and watch how we talk about things. It's interesting times. So, all right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to play my sit down, my chat with my buddy Doug Moore. We talked about fantasy football and a lot of other stuff. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona.
Sometimes you just feel tired, feel weak. And when you feel weak, you feel like you want to just give up. You gotta search within you. Try to find that inner strength and just pull that shit out of you and get that motivation to not give up and not be a quitter.
All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by one of my buddies, by one of my peers over at Inside the Pylon, Doug Moore. We're going to talk some fantasy football, but first of all, we're going to get acquainted with him. This is his first time on the podcast, so welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting. I could not wait when you asked me to come on, and now I'm finally living the dream.
Yeah, well, I'm excited too, and so I know a little about you, but for the audience out there, give us kind of the Reader's Digest version of who Doug is, and then we'll talk a little bit about your fantasy football and your sports background.
Yeah, so I'm Doug. I have been writing fantasy football. It's my third year going into it. I started writing a couple summers ago. I've written for a ton of sites, as Sharona knows. I write for a ton now, and I also dabble a little bit in writing with my home team, the Patriots. I write for them for a couple sites, along with writing about fantasy football. I've written for such sites such as Razzball, eDraft Sports, Inside the Pylon, Gridiron Experts. I've done some stuff over at Fantasy Football Today. I've been all over the place, but I'm glad to be where I am now, especially being on this show with you.
Well, I'm so happy to have you, and I was excited as well. So I'm glad that we were able to make it happen. So one of the things that we do here is talk a little bit about how you got into fantasy football. So tell us, when did you start playing, and what drew you to the what is now the national pastime, playing fantasy football?
Yeah, so I've been playing fantasy football for, oh boy, I've probably been playing now for, I want to say, close to 10 years now, maybe a little bit longer. I'm turning 23 on Monday, so probably since I was just before I was a teenager. My uncle actually invited me to one of their family leagues. I didn't know any better, and I was just starting to really get into sports then, and I've been doing it ever since, and you know, I've just been joining, I really was just doing that for many years, and I got to the point where, I want to write about fantasy football. I love it, and I try to give as much advice, so I actually just said on Twitter, I'm like, who is looking for a writer? Like, I just want to write, and that's how I got started with actually the sports script, and it's just been smooth sailing ever since.
Well, good. Well, welcome. It's a great community. We talk on this show all the time about what a great community the fantasy football community is. Particularly other aspects of Twitter and social media can be, troubled waters. Let's just put it that way. Troubled waters, and but fantasy football Twitter is definitely, in my opinion, one of the, if not the best, one of the best communities out there. So, did you play sports? Were you always a sports guy?
Yeah, I started playing. So funny enough, the sport I played the longest was not football. It was actually bowling. I bowled for about 15 years. I started when I was 4 years old, and I had to stop right before I turned 20. I went to nationals, and I hurt my elbow out there, actually, so I haven't played since. I played football in high school. I was a guard, and I played nose, but I was also the smallest guy on the team. I'm only 5'6", and I played D4. But I played baseball. I've done bowling. I've done football. And I do a lot of coaching. I do actually a lot of Special Olympics coaching. My two brothers are
awesome.
Yeah, both of my brothers. I have a twin brother and a 12-year-old brother. They both have autism. So I got involved when my twin brother did, and
props to you for that. That is such a rewarding thing to do.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I've been doing it now for 11 years now as a volunteer slash a coach. And you know, I've always stayed involved with sports, even though at the ripe old age of near 23, my body has broken down to the point where I can't play as much as I'd like to anymore. So I still get to live it through writing about it and coaching about it when I can.
Well, that is so awesome, and kudos to you for doing that. You'll have to come back, and we'll have to talk about autism, because we do talk a lot about on this show about people dealing with disabilities and what have you. So that is I'm so honored to know you, to know that you do something like that, because it is so important, and it's such a great thing.
Yeah, I've been extremely honored, and I'm just excited that I get to do it each and every year. I coach. I started up a bowling program for my town probably about 7 years ago. I did basketball before then, and the bowling program we do during the fall and winter and into the early spring every year. They have practice every week. They do some competitions, and it's always fun. It's rewarding. I see my usual kids that come back every year, and then always there's new ones, and we're always expanding. So it's always fun to keep doing it, and just being able to stay a part of it.
Yeah.
This whole organization, and just being able to go every week, for example, and take part in something that not only you're doing for the good of the community, but something you enjoy doing.
Well, we'll have to talk about bowling too next time. So you write for Inside the Pylon, and how long have you been writing there? And what is your content going to be about?
So I've been writing for Inside the Pylon about 3 months now. I approached Mark Schofield back.
Great guy.
Yeah, great guy. I couldn't say enough about him.
Yeah.
Probably about May or so, and I said, hey, listen, you looking for any writers? Because they were a really big up-and-coming site.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but some of the stuff they just pump out there.
It's amazing.
It's so much. And so I got into it, and I said, I'm a fantasy writer, and Mark and I have talked before, and he said, we tried several times to try and have a fantasy sort of football side to the website, and what I want to do is come in and do that and help revitalize it. So I've been doing a lot of fantasy football articles, a lot of generalized articles I've been doing up to this point, and that's really all you can do up until recently when we saw preseason happening. So a lot of your top 10, busts, or top 10 overvalued, undervalued. I actually have a piece that is in the works right now. It's being worked on by our great staff of editors, firsthand. It's going to be about guys that I think could take over starting roles by mid-season.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be coming out hopefully next week. But yeah, no, I think as we get progressing into the season, and I know you and I behind the scenes are still working out a strategy and a game plan for how we're going to provide the best content out there for this upcoming season. It's going to be a lot of hard-hitting stuff. We're going to cover a lot of topics. And not only that, but we're going to provide great content. So we're going to do our normal, waiver wire, best matchups, worst matchups. But then we're going to delve deeper. We're going to look at those deep sleepers. We're going to look at guys that maybe you didn't think about before but will now. And it only helps when we have a great staff of guys in general that know so much about football to help us with that acumen and learn a little bit more and help apply it to fantasy football.
Yeah, the more eyes looking at things, the better, and the more perspective you get, the better. So yeah, my first article, my debut article for ITP, dropped this morning. I'll be keeping a diary of my journey through DFS. I have been talking about and saying, I'm going to play DFS. I'm going to play DFS, and I didn't until this year, and so that's one of the things that I'll be doing, and I'm actually working on some other things as well. So it's interesting. You came into fantasy football during the internet Twitter era. I came in. I had been playing fantasy football since, and this is a great time for me to correct myself, because I had said since 2005 or 2006, but I went back and looked, and it was actually 2004 when I was the first year that I started playing. So I've been doing this for like 12 years now. And when I first started, the internet was a thing, but it was just becoming big. This was before, they were starting, but this was before Yahoo's website, and they had a website, but it was before they really became big. They were starting to become big, and so I've got an opportunity to watch it grow through social media and the internet and everything, and it really has made it. I think that's what has made it as big as what it is.
Yeah, no, it's expanded so many in so many ways over a short amount of time, and that comes just with technology in general. When you and I both started probably 10 plus years ago, smartphones weren't around. Laptops were still just getting into the thing. There were no such thing as tablets or iPads. So the accessibility was really something that we didn't have like we do nowadays, and there's just a lot more things expanding. There's a lot more ways to look at fantasy besides the top layer of stats now, and we've seen that really expand. And even so with DFS wasn't thought of 10 years ago, and look what it's become in such a short time. So there just proves that there's a lot of things expanding with fantasy football, fantasy sports in general. And, it's going to continue to boom. And like you said, it's a great community to be part of because not only do you have great guys part of it, a lot of intelligent guys who have brought a lot to the table and expanded on it throughout the years as well. So it's a great, industry, great group to be a part of. And, it's going to keep expanding. And really it's going to only bring in more people, which, it should be because it's a fun experience. It's a different take on sports, not just fantasy football, but also fantasy sports in general. So, it's a great thing what we've seen it come in 30 years when you used to have to submit your picks in by mail or your lineups by mail, or you had to do live drafts only. Now live drafts are a luxury at some points, which I haven't even gotten to be a part of yet, and I wish to be. So it's a huge industry that's changed so much in the past 20, 30 years, and even more so in the past 10 years, like you said.
Yeah, when I first started, the league that I joined was a keeper league, and it was, live draft, and we submitted our rosters via email, and he used the commissioner used an Excel spreadsheet and all that, and it was. Yeah, so it was very different from what it is now. So let's talk about fantasy in general, and let me ask you this. Well, first of all, let me ask you, what kind of league did you first start playing?
So going back to it, when my uncle first started asking me to play in it, it was just a simple 12-team. It wasn't a keeper league. It was just a redraft every year. I don't believe it was PPR or anything like that. I don't think PPR was actually that big back then. So it was just a standard 12-team league. We had a live, when I say a live draft, we had a live draft on, I want to say back then we were on, I want to say CBS or NFL.com. And, it was just something where we drafted one day, online for an hour and a half or whatever. And we just made our weekly lineups. And I used to pester them all the time with trade offers. I would send everybody at least 5 a week because, I had nothing better to do. I focused so much on this league. As a teenager, that, I annoyed everybody, but somehow they kept letting me back. It was a mixture of family and friends of some of the family members. So it's been going strong. We have our date. We're actually adding keepers this year.
Oh, cool.
Finally, it's the first time ever we're adding keepers even though we've changed websites like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
And so it's been going strong still. And like you said, you had a keeper league. I didn't, but now we're finally starting to add keepers. So it adds a whole interesting dynamic to keep it interesting. It's a small $20 league, so you got to put some stakes in it to it. You got to make it a little more interesting. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, it might get a little bit dull. But now we're adding a new flavor to it.
So are you guys going to keep 4 guys, or what kind of, is it like a modified keeper? What was it? How is it?
So what it is that we get to keep 1 keeper, and it had to be somebody that was drafted outside of the top 3 rounds that we could bring onto this roster this year without drafting. And I'm trying to think. I know if they had to be drafted outside of the 4th round, or outside of the third round. They couldn't have been drafted in the first three. It could be 4 and below.
Okay.
Even trades or even if they were on waiver wires. So it basically none of the top players from last year at least, but there's still obviously guys round 4 and later that did really well and could be drafted now in these first 3 rounds this year. So I'll tell everybody I really wanted to keep Antonio Brown. I didn't get to keep him because he was drafted in the first round. So I actually kept Amari Cooper, who I drafted in the 4th. I didn't draft him. I traded for him. He was drafted in the 4th round by my uncle. So that's who my guy is this year.
Okay, very good. Very interesting. So what guys are you big on this year? What guys are you are you avoiding? And is there a particular position that you pay more attention to than the other?
Yeah, so I think when you look in terms of depth, you're going to look more at the, running backs and wide receivers because those are the guys you're going to have to play more than others. So you play one quarterback, in most leagues at least, 1 or 2 quarterbacks and 1 tight end maybe. But, you could be starting 2 or 3 running backs, 2 or 3 wide receivers, and there's just a whole echelon. There's a lot of depth at all the positions, but, we've seen with something like quarterbacks, you can sit on a quarterback. With tight ends are unpredictable, but running backs and wide receivers aren't that. They're consistent every year with, there's always going to be guys that, weren't thought about as, major contributors the year before when you drafted them, and then they turn out to be studs. So, but I think more so you have to focus a lot on that. For me at least, quarterbacks I usually wait on. I'm not going to go after a guy like Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers when I can get a guy like Phillip Rivers 10 rounds later who did really well last year, or even a guy like Andy Dalton as well. Just to throw out a couple names, Phillip Rivers I'm extremely high on this year.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so just talking about him real quick, a lot of people don't know this, but through the first half of the season, weeks 1 through 8 last season, Phillip Rivers was the number 2 quarterback in fantasy. And then he suffered a whole slew of injuries, his offensive line. Melvin Gordon wasn't playing well. He lost Keenan Allen. He lost, Malcolm Floyd as well. So it's a situation where he's bouncing back. He's got an offensive line that, when healthy, is actually pretty good. Melvin Gordon's getting a little bit of hype as a second-year guy, post-hype, I guess they call it. He's got Keenan now. He's got Travis Benjamin as well. So there's going to be guys, I think, there that can help him. If he has a healthy cast like he did last year, he's going to go right back into fantasy relevance and be a guy that outperforms his ADP. I think he's like 12th or 13th quarterback taken. So,
yeah. He's gonna get his numbers. I don't think that there's any question about that. Having watched the Chargers though in that first preseason game, they're just to me they look like a bad football team.
Yeah, overall it's not a team to be confident in, even in a division like the AFC West where there's a little bit of a gap, not a gap, but it's a little bit wide open. Even though the defending Super Bowl champions are in that division. The Raiders improved a ton. The Chiefs are always going to stay in there. And then the Broncos, obviously, with one of the best defenses. And I think if there's a quote-unquote black sheep of the AFC West, it's the Chargers because, they have an offense that when healthy, and that's a big if or when, could be really good, but also their defense is just, there's not a lot of good pieces on it. And then we're dealing with this debacle where they spent a number 3 overall pick on a guy that still hasn't even shown up or signed with the team yet. And that's a whole mess of an issue. But yeah, I don't see this team doing really well on defense this year. I think they could be well on offense, but again, I think with the type of teams that are in the AFC West, I think that they're going to be the clear team that's going to finish at the bottom. Maybe like a 6-10, 5-11 team, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So, is quarterback that position? Is that something that some guys like? My brain is not working today. Our friend at the NFL Network, Matt, with his reception perception, he kind of focuses on wide receivers. Or do you just pay attention to all positions?
I try to pay attention to all of them because all of them play a part in it. But there are some that are more unpredictable than others. And I guess going into it a little bit, tight ends. There's just always every year there's guys that are gonna do really well that you don't expect, and then there's guys that you thought are gonna do really well that didn't. So Gronk at the top, and then even going from there was a lot of different things going on. So a guy like Gary Barnes was the number 2 tight end in fantasy last year, where we weren't even sure if he was going to be the starting tight end on the Browns, and look what he did. He went undrafted probably in most leagues, if not all of them. A guy like Delaney Walker, he was also a very good tight end last year, even on a team like the Titans where he had, I think, 90 or close to 90 receptions. Your Titans, by the way, actually. Yeah. There's just a lot of Jordan Reed, another guy who's always been good, but health was an issue, and then he does really well. But I don't think anybody expected him to do as well as he did. And then there's guys like Jordan Cameron, for example, that just dropped off. Jimmy Graham was having a rough season even before he had the injury. So there's just a lot of questions, and there's a lot of twists and turns with that position. So I try to focus on all of them, but there are some that you just can't predict, and there's some that are easier to try and figure out than others.
Yeah. It is, you mentioned Jordan Cameron, and I'm doing a draft right now in an MFL 25, and his name, I was looking at tight ends. I think we're like in round 16, something like that, and he's still out there. Do you think that he's done?
Yeah, I think if there's a situation where I don't think he's in a better situation than he could be right now, considering the coaching staff. We saw Adam Gase, their new head coach. He threw a lot to Martellus Bennett and then Zach Miller last year. But I think, even with that, and even hopefully with improved play by Ryan Tannehill, there's just a lot of guys to throw to, and I don't think I think we haven't seen much positive talk about Jordan Cameron so far. And he was a guy that had a lot of hype coming to Miami. Mm-hmm. He had a good couple of years in Cleveland. I think it was a 2-year, $16 million contract, and he just hasn't lived up to the hype. And I think when you look at Miami, they have to make sure they throw the ball to Jarvis Landry, to Devontae Parker, to Arian Foster, and then some of the other guys too as well. So like Leonte Carroo, their 3rd-round pick out of Rutgers, Kenny Stills. There's a ton of guys to throw to. Yeah. And I just think that they might just phase out the tight end position in terms of the passing game, or not include it as much as we had hoped it would be.
And they still have Deion Sims too, right?
Yeah, they still have Deion Sims, who some people like. And granted, if Jordan Cameron can't do well, I don't think Deion Sims can either, just because I think that Jordan Cameron's at the top of that depth chart. And it's just a position where, or a situation, I should say, where there's a lot of mouths to feed, and someone's going to have to suffer in the end. I think it might just be Jordan Cameron in the entire tight end position.
Yeah, I really like Deion Sims coming out, and thought that, he would find a home there. And I forget who the tight end was that they had that did so well and then got injured. And so, yeah, they've it's just a situation, and of course, the Titans picked up Rashard Matthews, and I kind of hate to say this, but as Ryan Tannehill goes, so does the Dolphins and their offense, and I'm just still not sold on him.
Yeah, this is really the make or break year for him, I think. I know that he signed a big contract extension, but still, we are waiting for him to really break out and be what we hope he would. He's a wide receiver converted to a quarterback out of Texas A&M. I think he was a top 10 pick a couple years ago. He has so many good he's just oozing with athleticism, but just can't put it all together. And he's inconsistent at times. He makes bad mistakes. He's got a great arm and he's mobile, but it's just not all of it's there, and it just
hasn't been able to put it together.
Exactly, he hasn't been able to utilize all of his skills and talents at one time. It's, you see one week maybe his accuracy shows up, but his long ball doesn't show up, or maybe his pocket awareness shows up one week, but then he can't seem to escape the pocket, or he can't just see the field. It's just a situation where he hasn't done everything right at one time, and that's just a situation where the Dolphins, with a new regime, they could be quick to pull the trigger and try and, either trade him with how the quarterback market is and how, we aren't seeing as many, NFL-ready prospects come out. We could see a team try to take a chance on him and Dolphins go another direction. Mm-hmm. But this could really be a make or break, because when you look at it, he's got a ton of weapons around him, and he did last year too. But
Yeah.
Devontae Parker's healthy now. You have Jarvis Landry there. You had a really good running back in Lamar Miller, but that goes up to part of it being the coaching staff not using him right. But now you have Aaron Foster as well. There's just a ton of weapons for him. So I don't think there's much for him to make excuses besides maybe the offensive line. There's not really room for error this year, and this could be a make or break for him.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how, and that division is one to watch, and of course the Patriots that's the big team in that division, but then you see what, of course the Bills are having kind of a snake bit off season. My goodness, what else can happen with them? But I still like Tyrod Taylor. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Who else are you kind of high on? And then we'll talk a little bit about guys you're avoiding.
Yeah, so, another guy that I'm looking at, and I mentioned him earlier, and it's not so much that I'm high on him and everybody else isn't. I just have these extremely lofty expectations for him, and we just talked about him, or I did at least. Lamar Miller.
Yeah.
He left the team. He left the Dolphins. You could make an argument that he was extremely underutilized.
Yeah.
They didn't use him as a full workhorse back that we all thought he could be. And he went and signed a big deal with the Texans, where if you think about it, Arian Foster and Lamar Miller actually switched spots, really. Because Arian Foster was with the Texans last year, and now he's with the Dolphins, and then Lamar Miller was with the Dolphins, and now the Texans. But, they gave him big money. I think it was 4 years, over $20 million, which is a lot of money for a running back. And it's a situation where I think he's going to be with a better coaching staff. He's going to be with a team that actually can put it all together, and a much better defense as well, where they don't have to abandon the run as early sometimes. So I think he's a guy who is easily a lock if healthy, which it's not really a big if because he does play, but I always mention if. But if he plays 15, 16 games, he's going to be a guy who's going to get at least 250 touches, 275, where he'll be used both in the run game and the receiving game.
Yeah.
And I think his ceiling, and I was actually talking with Field Yates on my podcast about maybe half an hour ago about this, maybe a little bit longer, but he agrees with me. This is a guy that there's not a lot out there that is going to get a workhorse type treatment, and the sky's the limit for him. So I think he has the upside to be a top 3, and he stressed upside with me because upside is upside, but he could be a top 3 running back in standard and PPR just because of how much he'll be used and just how talented he is and how much of a better situation he's in.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the general thought on him, and for his sake, I hope that he does it. The Texans' offense is very interesting. There are a lot of guys who their ADPs are high. Will Fuller, they've got Jalen Strong. They've got, of course, Nuke is sort of the household name, I suppose. But there's a lot of mouths to feed there too, and Brock Osweiler, you're already seeing people start to say Tom Savage could be starting by midseason. So, I don't know. Why it's definitely a situation that that bears watching. What about guys you're kind of avoiding?
Yeah, so I think you've probably seen this, and I've not made any effort to hide this. I am not at all a fan of Matt Jones this year.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to unfortunately sit through my rants about him and how bad I think he is. But just to give a little insight into why I do not like Matt Jones.
Okay.
We saw guys who were by default sort of de facto number 1 running backs who had these lofty expectations because he's going to get the workload. We saw guys like Monty Ball a couple of years ago where he was being drafted as a first-round guy when he hadn't done much. It was just more so. I believe it was Noshawn Moreno actually had left the team, and then even a guy like on your Titans when Bishop Sankey was drafted in the 2nd round, everybody thought he was going to be a running back too. When in reality they flopped. They did in fantasy.
I tried to tell everyone. I was like, you guys are, you need to pump the brakes here, but nobody listened to me.
Yeah, and it's just a situation again with Matt Jones. Because Alfred Morris, he left, he went to the Cowboys, but last year their running attack was horrendous. I believe Alfred Morris just finished just above 4 yards a carry, if not below it. But then you look at a guy like Matt Jones, he finished with a 3.4 yards per carry. He also had 5 fumbles and 163 touches. So if you think about it, he's fumbling almost every other game because it's about 32 or so touches. So if he's getting 15 to 20 touches a game as a workhorse, he's fumbling every other game on that ratio. That's 8 fumbles a year if he fumbles 16. And he hasn't done well. We've seen it in the preseason so far. And, it's kind of the flip side of a coin. You can use it to your advantage when you're making an argument that someone looks bad in preseason, but then also you're going to use it for, to say someone's good. So it's hard to justify just based off preseason. But what he did last season was just bad. Mm-hmm. And, everybody's anointing him as this running back 2 again, where he's going to be a top 25 running back because, the Redskins have a better offense now. They have a good offensive line. But the thing is that he's not good. You can give some, like Trent Richardson, for example. When he was a rookie, he did really, really well. But he actually finished below 4 yards a carry, and he was just fed the ball so many times that he looked all right. But in reality, when you look at the stats, he wasn't. And this could be a situation where I don't think Trent Richardson, or I should say Matt Jones, gets as many touches as Richardson did with the Browns. But he's just being anointed as this guy when all we've seen from him is really, really bad so far. So, and I could go on for 20 more minutes at least.
I can tell you're very passionate about this.
I do not like Matt Jones in fantasy this year. I don't think I've ever been so passionate about a guy I do not like in fantasy. And I've lost many, many Twitter followers over it. But you know what? It's going to be great in the end when he's like a top 50, 50, I should say. It's that running back. So, yeah, there's one guy in particular I do not like more than everybody else, and that is Matt Jones.
Okay, well, I think that's fair enough. I've been avoiding him. It's not that – I've got similar concerns. It's not that, I'm not nearly as passionate about it. They're just they're guys that – you're still in kind of prevent mode with. And I sort of feel that way about Lamar Miller. I haven't yet – taking the plunge with him yet, although I understand all of the arguments for him. I think if I've learned anything playing this wonderful thing that is fantasy football, is you just got to go with your gut. Anytime that I've ever not done that, I've regretted it. And so, at the end of the day, it's about having fun and, building a team that you believe in, one that you like rooting for, and all that. So what's going on with Doug? You mentioned your podcast. Tell everybody a little bit about that, and when can we expect some of your next articles to drop?
Yeah, so I am on, I've been doing this probably for about, I want to say 3 months now, if not longer, probably maybe about 4 or 5 months actually, now that I think about it. I joined up with Colm Kelly. He has been doing the Overtime Ireland podcast for a few. Mm-hmm. He's been doing it for a few years now. He had put out a help wanted ad, you could say, that he's looking for a co-host. I threw my hat in it, and off the air earlier tonight before I came on here. I only did it because he has so many followers, and that's not true at all. He's done really well for himself with the whole website, OvertimeIreland.com. And the podcast itself. He's had some really great guests on. He has a good rapport, and him and I have gelled really well so far.
Good.
And like I said, we just had Field Yates on tonight from ESPN.
Awesome.
And we have Sean Siegel on. We've had Evan Silva, Mike Clay on. We've had so many great guests on. It's crazy to get their insight and just find out more about them besides Twitter, where they're just a name, a face, and 140 characters. So it's been really great doing that, and we're going strong. So that podcast we just recorded right before I came on here. So that'll be dropping probably tonight, if not tomorrow. And then in terms of some articles that I'll be doing, so I write for 5 different sites right now, at least, consistently. I write for Inside the Pylon, eDraft Sports, Gridiron Experts for Fantasy Football, and then I write for Pat's Pulpit and Scout, Patriots on Scout for the Patriots. So I have my next article, technically is coming out tomorrow morning. I did my top 50 wide receivers in PPR this year. That'll be dropping on eDraft Sports tomorrow. I have my article in the works right now about top 10 guys who I think will be starters by midseason. These are guys that probably aren't expected to be starters right now, but could be by that time. And
are there any Titans on your list?
Are there any Titans on my list? I honestly was, and this is a true story. You can believe it however you want.
Okay.
I was gonna put Dorial Green Beckham on there because of how he's been really relegated to second team so far. Well, with the Titans because he was behind Tajay Sharp and Rashad Matthews, but that's kind of moot now, I think, a little bit because he got traded. So I was actually writing it up the night before he got traded. I went to work on the next day, and then the trade happened. So I'm like, I got to think of somebody else now. So no, officially, no, there are no Titans, but there was going to be.
Yeah, it to me would have been very, very, very hard for Dorial Beckham Green to become a starter this year. It really was probably going to be next year before my expectations. I'm talking, about my expectations simply because of his situation. But it's very interesting and, certainly some opportunity in Philadelphia. Doug, it was such a pleasure. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at your own disposal, at your own risk, at DMooreNFL. That's D as in Doug, Moore NFL. And no, I do not work for the NFL, as some people have thought I did. So that's where you can find me on Twitter. And please do so at your own discretion.
All right. Thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You as well. Thanks for having me on, Sharona.
Okay. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Hey, shout out to Doug Moore for joining us in that segment. A great fantasy football info from him and a great chat. Such a pleasure to sit down with him last night. And I love meeting all of my fantasy football peers in the community. I say this a lot, but it is so true. It's such a great community, and it's populated with so many great people. And we've kind of had a slate of our male fantasy getting some more women back on here. Lisa London has been a regular contributor on this show. And, of course, my girl, Jennifer Eakins, she and I touched base a few weeks ago and said that we sit down and have a chat about fantasy football. And she's writing for some new websites, and so we can catch up with her, and of course talk about the Broncos and their quarterback situation. We'll have to do that and get some more great women on here. It's interesting. I'm going through an MFL 25 right now, and I like the way my team is shaping up. I'll tweet that out when we might actually get done today. It's going pretty fast. I tweeted, I think, through round 16 maybe last night. I think we're in round 18, somewhere around there now. And I just picked up Terrell Pryor, who's looking really good with the Browns. You knew that was coming. You knew that, he's so physically talented, and he's a guy who he's such a great athlete and really having a great preseason so far. And so is RG3. And, I said past year, I suppose, a change of scenery, a new team can work wonders for a lot of players. And I think we're going to see that with Robert Griffin III. So the Browns definitely a team to watch. I just picked up Carlos Williams. We need to talk some Bills. The Bills are I'm a Bills fan, man. They're having such a weird off season. We need to get Robin Mundy back on here, another regular contributor to this show, and talk about her Bills and what's going on with them. And I need to talk some more gaming. This show is kind of a follow-up. The music today is dedicated to Gawker because we're sort of doing a series of show where we're saying goodbye. And I almost cried on air last week because, I do read their work a lot. And fortunately, things are going to continue, in terms of the subblogs and what have you. So that's good news. And hopefully the writers at Gawker, the Gawker.com, will get other opportunities, and I'm sure that they will. We said it last week. It bears repeating again, and we're going to talk about that. Talk a little bit more about Gawker and Nate Parker and Amy Schumer and some other things in hour two. But it bears repeating that some really great writers have cut their teeth, so to speak, at Gawker, and independent media, independent news is a good thing. And so today's music is dedicated, and I'm really disappointed that my first song didn't turn out as well as because I was laughing about it last night. It didn't turn out as well as I expected, but yeah, it is sad, but I think that we'll see a lot of the work that they've done, and they've done some really great work. We'll see that continue. We're going to take a break and then head into our next hour two. Again, we're going to talk some more about Peter Thiel and Gawker and privacy, and I'm going to start a conversation that is long overdue about Juanita Broderick and Hillary Clinton, and how do we deal with it's just kind of similar, I suppose, in a way. How do we deal with men saying and doing bad things and the women who either are married to them or associate with them? So kind of an interesting topic. Anyway, we'll take a quick break, so stay tuned in. You are listening to Bat Talk with Sharona.
I love you.
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because, I had so much fun with this music for today. So Gawker has been sold and fortunately bought by Univision, as we mentioned in the first hour, bought by Univision. It's going to continue on, and that's great news. We sort of touched upon the trial and, my impressions about some of the things that, that went down. Now, we should be clear, the verdict, that lawsuit is on appeal, and so it's still the thing. I suppose things could change or what have you. We'll see. It's I have mixed emotions because I used to practice law, and so I'm very well aware of how expensive litigation is and how litigation gets funded oftentimes through ways that probably the general public doesn't. Watching the sausage made in any profession can sometimes be an uncomfortable and disconcerting process. In the legal field, it can be interesting as well. But Peter Thiel, who was outed by Gawker in a story that I disagreed with, and we talked about the Daily Beast and outing people who are trans, gay, don't fit that traditional, I suppose, mode. And it's wrong to do that. If there's any doubt whatsoever in your mind, let me clear that up for you. It's wrong to do that. And, was Peter Thiel a public figure? Was he not? I mean, obviously he's a very wealthy person, not someone who, probably more so now, I suppose, as a result of his outing. He spoke at the Republican National Convention and just recently wrote an article for the I believe it was the New York Times. We tweeted that out, and Matt and I talk about it, about privacy, and your privacy is very much a concern these days. Matt and I talk a little bit about that. If you're on the internet, if you use your phone, if you accept updates on your phone and look at what it says, they demand. It's a one-way ticket. They demand it. You can say no, but then you don't, get the app. So you're like, well, okay. And every time I get an email from Microsoft, I just got one this past week. Microsoft is updating its privacy terms. I'm like, oh, great. How did I get screwed this time? Because I know I'm getting screwed, and the companies take your personal and private information and they sell it, and it's a bad deal. And Matt and I talk a little bit about it. And we should talk about this some more. It's been a while. Yeah, I think overall Barack Obama has done a good job as president, but I do not like his record on civil rights, on privacy. We have seen a dramatic erosion in our privacy rights, all in the name of terrorism. But listen, that is a very blurry line anymore, and it's kind of scary, and something we need to talk about some more. Nate Parker, that's a topic that I wanted to touch upon. It kind of ties into why it's so important to have independent news sources like Gawker, like their subblogs, and how we talk about things, and what the media does sometimes when it comes to allegations against high profile, famous, if you will, men who have skeletons is just the latest, and Josh Brown, and on and on and on and on. But the Nate Parker situation is interesting, and here's the interesting thing. One of the more interesting things to me about it, Nate Parker is undergoing kind of a media blitz because Birth of a Nation is a long overdue and much needed piece of work, regarding Nat Turner and what happened with Nat Turner. Yet the face of that project, that piece of work, is Nate Parker, who has an incident in his past where 17 years ago, when he was a sophomore in college back in 1999, where he was accused of rape. He, along with his friend, who is also involved with him on this project, and he was accused of rape, and one of the cases went to trial. There was a conviction that was overturned on a technicality, and the victim refused to testify again because, for reasons that we don't fully know, because she committed suicide in 2002, and her story is completely lost in this entire thing. Not much, we don't care about dead women who lodged a rape allegation against a famous person 17 years ago. We don't care about her 19 years ago, whatever. We don't care about her. She's nothing to us. But she was a person, and she attempted suicide twice while this was going on, back several years ago, and ultimately took her life. And her brother came out and spoke. It was a brief blip on the horizon, and then it went away because we don't care about her. We don't care about Josh Brown's wife, who alleged over 20 instances of violence in their marital relationship. The stories are always about the men and their redemption, and how they're sorry, and what have you. And there was a very good article by over at BuzzFeed excuse me, by Anne Helen Peterson. It's entitled Nate Parker's Alleged Rape and the Limits of Hollywood Damage Control. And it's a very good look at how the media blitz does, come into play, and what media giants are responsible for helping whitewash these, if you'll pardon, probably a very bad way to phrase that, but how they try to spin these types of things in an effort to make things more palatable to the general public, and make money for the people who probably didn't do a very good job vetting these things. So I encourage you to read it. It's very, very, very interesting, and it is one of the few articles that I've read that actually touch upon some of the awful things that were alleged to have been done by Nate Parker and his friends toward the woman who lodged the accusation against him. And the backlash that you face when you come forward with these things is very much a forgotten and reported, under recognized aspect of these things. And we're not going to forget about this. We're not going to forget about her. We're going to talk about it. We are going to make sure that she's not forgotten. And so we'll be tweeting out this article after the show is over. But we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to play the next an hour series, Chopping It Up with Matt and Sharona. So stay tuned in. You are listening to Back Talk with Sharona. All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by, this is episode 3, I think, of Chopping It Up with Matt and Sharona. Always a pleasure to sit down and chat with my buddy Matt Wood, and we've been going through a series of little sit-down chit-chats on Wednesday night, talking about the political election and some other things too. We didn't get to sit down on Wednesday night because technology has not been kind to me this week, which is why we didn't do a show on Wednesday. But I think that we've got all of our issues corrected. So fortunately, Matt was able to sit down with me on Thursday night. Matt, welcome back. I'm so happy we were able to do this.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Well, so there's a lot going on, a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started. You had sent me some things about privacy, and privacy is definitely something that we talk about on this show a lot, and it's kind of not funny, but and not really ironic, but it's fortuitous. That's a better word. Fortuitous that last Friday we were talking about Gawker, and of course the news today with Gawker, and so it's a good way to tie those things in, because we're revisiting that today on this show, following up with the sale of Gawker to Univision, the tabling, so to speak, of the Gawker name, although the subblogs will live on. And so it's a good way to kind of segue into this privacy discussion. And it's a huge issue. It's definitely an issue for me because I don't know, I'm sure at least some people listening out there have had this experience when you go to download an app or update something and you get that message and you're giving all of this information out there, and you know that they sell it. You know that there's definitely big business in selling your personal information.
Mhm. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if you use Facebook and Google, well, you're no longer private. Yeah. I mean, and that's ubiquitous. I mean, I use Google. I'm not going to be sitting up here on some sort of like high horse.
That's not a hill you're going to die on, right?
Yeah, I'm like, the sword is just in my belly as everybody else's when it comes to this. I use Google. I have Facebook and Twitter.
Well, but they all do it now, and so it's like, what are you going to do? Just go live in the woods somewhere and not ever,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a pokey person. I don't poke. Are you a Pokemon Go person?
I have played it. I will say it was kind of addicting right there in the beginning, but once I found out I had to get up and move, it became less appealing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's hot outside. It's hotter than a monkey's butt here, and so, I mean, if I can sit in my lovely, little teeny tiny room, and Matt knows this. And you guys know this. I'm a gamer. I love my Xbox One.
Yeah.
And I read a really good. Now, are you a gamer? Do you play console games? I forget.
I do play console games.
That's right. I know that. I'm so dumb.
I haven't really been hardcore into it lately. I definitely played up a lot of Battlefront when that came out because I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Yeah. And then I tried, and Fallout came, I think, out just before that, and I got that for Christmas, and it took me a minute to start playing it, and I don't know, I just can't get into it. Everybody's like,
I'm not a fan either. No.
It's like,
no, it doesn't appeal to me either. No, and I've tried it. I've tried them all. I've still got Fallout 3. I have Fallout New Vegas, and I have Fallout 4 now too. And I've tried them, and I've tried and tried and tried. And I know people that love them, and I'm a huge RPG player. Don't get me wrong. But I just can't get into it either. Just I don't know, something about it I just don't like. I don't like VATS for one thing. The VAT system where you have to pull up your little I call it the Game Boy, but whatever they call it in the game. And so, what's your all-time favorite game?
Ooh, geez. I will always have an affinity for Battletoads.
Yeah.
I wanted that game, and when I was a kid, it wasn't even my birthday. It wasn't Christmas. It was just out of the blue. Mom and Dad they're like, hey, we got you some new shoes. And I was needing new shoes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, cool. And so I go upstairs to the apartment, I open the box, and, I see my shoes. I'm like, oh, cool. And I start taking them to my room because I'm like, oh, these aren't getting put on until tomorrow morning for school. And my dad's like, well, take the shoes out of there. And I took the shoes out, saw the game. I was so excited. I played it. And of course, I could never get past the speed racer level. So, but I love playing it up to that. Never beat the game. I even have it on an NES emulator type thing, and even to this day, still can't beat it.
I read a really great article. We'll have to talk about this. I'll have to bug my buddy Owen Good and see if he'll come on and help me talk about this. But I read a really, really excellent article over at Polygon about New Age gaming and grandmas and grandpas, and how gaming, the 50, I believe, I forget where they cut it off, but 50 and older, I think, is where they cut it off. That age group compromises, like, it's comparable to the youngest group, the 18 to 34, I think, and they're like at 29%, and grandmas and grandpas are at like 26%. So older people are a huge component. Now, they won't admit it to you.
Oh,
right, because they're embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. It's good to be a gamer. It's kind of funny because I'm writing for Inside the Pylon now, and feel so fortunate. There's such a great group of guys, and so smart, and I feel so fortunate. But I had to update my profile and my bio and whatever, and so I was looking at, my Twitter bio and looking at my other online bios, the bio that I have for my own website, which kind of which I transferred over to theirs. And the first thing on there everywhere is gamer. So like I self-identify as a gamer first and foremost before anything else. And so, that article was fascinating to me to think about, as I get older and move into, these other age groups and what it's going to be for me and mean for me. And I already am seeing like some of the things that you see in newer games. You can tell that they are geared toward millennials and what have you. And so, I'll have to get Owen to come on and we'll have to talk about that. But let's go ahead and get back to the privacy. We sort of got off track a little bit. And I know that you had some things that you wanted to talk about. So I'm just going to turn the floor over to you and let you expand on that, expound on that.
Yeah, well, obviously privacy is a huge issue, and you kind of touched on a few points here with, Gawker and then your social media and ad revenue. I mean, for these sites to essentially be free in our state, in the current, world, they have to rely on ad revenue, which isn't so bad. I mean, to an extent of, hey, want to advertise on our site? Sure, here's the cost. However, it starts getting into these targeted ads, and there's a lot of, Facebook says, hey, we don't do this, but how am I having a phone conversation about, I don't know, window blinds? And all of a sudden I start seeing window blinds in my Facebook feed. It's like, and you didn't even have to Google, window blinds or ask anybody on Facebook. And, they're like, oh, no, we're not listening to anything. And like I said, there's no evidence or anything. It's just one of those things people notice.
Yeah. No, I've noticed that too. Yeah. I mean, it sort of freaked me out there for a while.
And so you get these targeted ads, and it's just all through what you post. You've gone to a few, you're on vacation, or you didn't actually go on vacation. You just took a couple days off work. Maybe you went around town and you checked in a bunch of places. Then all of a sudden it says like, oh, hey, you're really interested in the downtown life of Nashville and things like that. It's like, no, it's
yeah, see, I used to use Square, I think, Foursquare, and now I forget, Swarm is what it's called now. And then the more stalkery aspects of it, kind of became apparent, and I was like, you know what, and you start to get online hate and people you're tweeting bad stuff at you, and you're like, I'm probably not going to do this anymore. So I don't use it anymore, and I'm super careful about kind of what because people are mean. People are it's interesting times, let's just put it that way.
Oh yeah. And I mean so and you made the thing of like, man, once it's out there, which it's true. I mean, you can get off the grid. Whatever you've already had out there, though, it's out there. So if there was any sort of profile, it's there. So, but there's also a lot of privacy, just not protection against Google and Facebook and the like. But you also have to think of privacy against criminals. Governments, including your own, and all sorts of, jilted lovers and things of that nature.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Having been stalked, it's I mean, it's something that you definitely you have to be aware of and think about and all of that. It is interesting, but what do you do? I mean, I know that you can get ad blocker and and some of these other things, but what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, so at first, you can. If you permanently do not want like an online presence, I guess step one, don't go online. That would be it. It's like think of it this way: abstinence only privacy. If you don't get it, you're not going to get hurt. Yeah. So, but most everybody who's listening to this obviously are online and things. So, and there's a few sites I linked to you that I'm going to assume you're going to put in the little description of your
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
thing.
Yeah.
Now, so yeah, you touched on a few things. Ad blocker. I use something called disconnect.me, and what that does is all these third-party trackers and ad analytics and things like that, they just get blocked. Because an ad blocker is just going to block the ad, and the other stuff is just going to take care of the other stuff. And they don't sell your information or anything. They don't log it, I should say. Because just because they don't sell it doesn't mean that they don't log it for future use of selling it. And there's other things. A VPN, which think of it as let's say you're standing on a bridge and then there's a shore. You could swim across. Everybody can see what you're wearing and how you're getting across that water. So you're out there in the open. So that's probably what most people on the internet are doing. Now a VPN is like you getting in a submarine and going across the water.
Yeah, I always wondered really what I see VPN being mentioned, and not to use you as Google or whatever, but I just never took the time to look it up. What exactly is VPN?
Virtual private network. It's it encrypts your traffic. So nobody.
Well, it's interesting because was it you that sent me that article, or did I find it on my own that talked about how the government, if you encrypt stuff, that's how they come after you because you're encrypting things.
Well, a lot of the things that you use today, Facebook, that's secure connection. Your email is usually secure connections between servers. When you any login type thing, that's usually a secure and encrypted connection. So there'd be a lot of people doing it just unknowingly. Companies, you're at work, maybe you have to work from home. 9 times out of 10, you have to log into their VPN for you to be able to access the files and things. All it does is it protects from people from outside seeing kind of what you're doing. And I know that sounds a bit nefarious, but it really isn't. It's just
interesting.
You doing your business, and you obviously you don't want someone to steal any information out of that.
Yeah.
But you can make your own with a Raspberry Pi. Those are $35 little computers. They're amazing devices. I have 3 of them. They're so cool.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I can send you a few links. They're neat.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to just take a look at them and just to be informed and whatever.
Yeah. And then you can also use different email clients such as Thunderbird. That's that kind of encrypts on your side. And that's the thing with encryption too. There's a lot of apps out there such as secure messaging like Whisper and Signal. Or not Whisper, Signal. Whisper is like a post-secret type app. But Signal's one of them. The only downside to some of these things is the person you send it to also has to download the app, which is fine because they're usually free. But
I always get nervous though. You and I talked about this last night when I was having issues with this recording app. And free's good, right? And I want free. We all do. But the sort of downside to all of that is when you're downloading. First of all, you have to be careful. And I always check and look and see what other people are saying. But the other thing is you get these because that's how it makes it free. You get these other things that kind of bundle together with it, and so you're like,
Yeah, CNET, which is a big software repository to download things.
I use CNET a lot.
Yeah, they kind of got slapped across the face a few years ago when they found out that they were pushing ad software with their stuff, and people didn't like that. So now when you install, you really have to look because when you hit next, it's also going to ask, hey, do you want to install this toolbar? Hey, do you want to install that? and sometimes it just says accept, thinking people actually have to accept it or else the program won't install, which is completely not the case. You just hit decline, it goes to the next screen.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, you're right. Sometimes it's not clear. It's not exactly clear.
Oh yeah, it's definitely tricking you into installing that stuff.
Yeah.
Some other things, like privacytools.io, they list a ton of tools. Let's see, you can make Firefox very, very, very secure in terms of your web browsing. There's things called a DNS leak, where you may be secure just through different little packets and everything going across the wires. Sometimes those packets can fall off, and it has your DNS is your like your IP address in a way, and so those fall off, and they can find out your IP address from that stuff. But there's stuff that can mask that as well. But then people go, well, why do you need all this stuff? And I mean, 9 times out of 10, you probably don't need every little thing that's on that list. I mean, if you really wanted a completely secure, locked down experience, you would be running Tails, which is a Linux operating system. It actually got a lot of attention during the Edward Snowden
Yeah.
leak, because that's what he and Glenn Greenwald used in order to communicate with. Obviously very secure. The government didn't even know what was going on. But yeah, there's a lot of good privacy tools. But then the question is, why do I need to be so, secure? Or, I don't have anything to hide, so why should it matter? Well, nobody has anything to hide, but you still shit with the door closed,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, yeah, you're doing nothing wrong in the bathroom, but you probably don't want other people watching you do it. Yeah. It's just those things. I mean, and another thing is, we know the government tracks in terms of metadata. Here's one to freak you out for all you cell phone users.
Yeah.
You have the Stingray. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this device before. This is a real device. This is not a conspiracy theory type thing. You can look it up on Wikipedia. They're IMSI catchers, and what they do is they spoof your cell, the cell tower. Sorry, I started saying IMSI catcher and conspiracy theory, and Siri turned on.
Oh, that's so.
Wow. I was like, oh, is this going to be war games?
Yeah, right.
That's
kind of scary and spooky and abandoned ship.
Yeah.
Hang up. Oh my God.
So
and there are other things too, that hackers employ, and that can hack your phone and get all your contacts and your passwords and everything. They just have to be close to you.
Oh yeah. And the metadata, people think that's nothing. It's like, oh, you're just getting my, IP address. I'm like, well, they're also getting your time and what you looked up. I mean,
how secure are these, like Google and Firefox, which are the two main web browsers that I use, allow for private browsing? How secure are those?
Not really. So, like in the privacy tools link there, and the other 3 links those give tools and guidance, especially about what is this, why is it important to privacy, and how can I protect myself against it. It lists a very nice thing about how making Firefox pretty secure. Google, on the other hand, has very limited options because they went the Apple route in the way of, hey, just make everything user-friendly. I should just be able to click it open and it work. And the private mode, all that does is it sends a do not track, which it may not track the main thing, but ads and stuff will still track because nothing's watching them. They're third party. It won't keep any cookies. It won't keep any history. And that's pretty much it. all it is it's not saving anything to your computer. When you're in incognito mode or private mode or what have you, whatever you type into the browser is still seen by your your ISP, your internet service provider. So if I'm going to use a good example and bad example. I'm not saying everybody, but let's just say most white males or most males probably use incognito mode
when they're looking for porn.
Yeah, searching for porn. So maybe their wives.
Some females. I mean, females.
Oh yeah,
there are women who like porn too.
I'm sure there are. I guess maybe I just made a general remark, but people.
I may or may not still have HBO now, even though Game of Thrones is on hiatus because of late night TV.
Yeah. So people using it so their porn the porn stuff doesn't get saved to their hard drive. It's not in their browser history and whatnot, which is fine. I
clear mine pretty regularly. Is that how safe and secure is that?
All that's doing is taking that off your computer. It's just erasing like the cookies and stuff.
They still have it at your ISP.
Oh yeah. If someone wanted to, you gotta think of your porn is your porn, and and what you look at is what you. And I'm saying
unless Gawker gets their hands on it, and then it's everybody's porn.
Yeah. Legal porn, whatever you're into, yeah. Someone gets their hands on it. How embarrassing is that? Oh, hey, you really like redheads or cheerleaders or,
whatever. Yeah.
Whatever the whole thing is.
Yeah.
And then, if you're, looking up torrent sites or something, that's not protecting you either. And then, bad examples could be, these idiots that look up, and that they're actually using it for crime, in terms of, how to break into a house or how long can a child stay in a car and things like that. When the police come, they can get that search stuff from your ISP, and they're going to get the whole search terms. And
there was a time there, and I'm not sure legally where we are on that, where the FBI and stuff. Law enforcement was Freudian slip was arguing that they could get that stuff without a warrant and what have you, and that's one of the things, and I definitely want to talk to you about the Gawker stuff. We're at almost at 28 minutes. We're right at 28 minutes, so we're not gonna be able to hit on some of this election stuff. We'll do that next week. Yeah. But it is one of the things that I think that Barack Obama overall has done a pretty good job, but his record on privacy and civil rights has really troubled me.
Oh yeah.
And so we'll have to add that to the list and continue this privacy thing. But I want to ask you, because this is kind of a theme of today's show a little bit, is about the Peter Thiel thing. Is it Thiel or Thiel? Do you?
I always said Thiel. I don't know.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too, but I'm not the best person to ask anybody. So Gawker was sold today, and this is being Thursday, and if you value and treasure independent journalism, which you should, everybody should, even though you may decry some of the actions that kind of led us down this path. It's a sad day, to watch that happen, but it's going to go on. The sublogs are going to go on. Gawker as a name is not going to go on. It's going to the sublogs are going to be under the auspice of Univision, and so I think that that's a good thing. But I sent you an article. It's no one is well, I shouldn't say that. Let me back up and rephrase. Very, very, very few people are completely good or completely bad. Now, there are some people I think we know that are completely and utterly bad. And, maybe they didn't start that way, but they ended up that way. I mean, Timothy McVeigh is the name that comes to my mind. The serial killers.
Yeah.
Serial rapist. Darren Sharper is a terrible person. But most people do have redeeming qualities. I bet you, Darren Sharper is probably wonderful to his daughter, who he loves very much. So not everyone, you don't, there's a lot of gray is what I'm trying to say. But it is ironic to see what Peter Thiel had to say in the New York Times regarding privacy and what have you, when you consider his and listen, I what happened to him, what Gawker did was wrong, and what Gawker did to Hulk Hogan was wrong, and we shouldn't, privacy should matter, and but it is kind of ironic, don't you think?
Oh yeah, and and Peter Thiel made a lot of great points in that article.
He really did.
About, personal privacy, in even talking about, in Hulk Hogan, in revenge porn, where, hey, me and this person made a sex tape in a loving relationship. Now we're not in one. I'm just going to put it on RedTube or whatever. And, that's, that's stuff that we should be looking at. And the same thing is like, WikiLeaks. Now, it's one thing to release information about an entity, such as a government or a corporation doing shady business deals and unconstitutional things. And the DNC itself is an entity, but releasing personal voicemails between families and their personal details, it's like, what purpose does that serve? I mean, I get if the email was like, hey, we need to put 2 bullets in this guy. Okay, that's evidence against the entity. But the email says, hey babe, I'm gonna be a little late for dinner, a little late tonight. I guess I'll just grab something to eat. Love you, and gives her like a pet name. It's like, does that, what's the point of that? That has no bearing on any of our private lives in terms of us. I don't care if some, staffer, was out doing what he wasn't supposed to. Hell, you got preachers fucking the choir every day.
Yeah. Oh, preachers, we could have a whole show on how preachers are the worst, and their kids sort of kind of are too, but time does not permit. Yeah, it is interesting. The article definitely has some good points, but as you pointed out, he's certainly not attacking WikiLeaks or any of that. How hypocritical is it?
Well, I mean, in this article, he's only focused on this one thing, so that is that. But yeah, we, and like sometimes it's like, are our rights absolute, or are there gray areas or things like that?
The likability. Listen, Matt, I talk about that on this show a lot. How what we permit and what we don't seem anymore in this age of likability and clicks and retweets and the social media era, so to speak, depends on who you like. And the one of the most recent examples that I used was the Kim Kardashian Kanye West thing, where they possibly illegally taped Taylor West and used edited versions of that conversation in an effort to promote their agenda. And so, I mean, it's...
Yeah, and I mean, and then, plus it gets all ridiculous because it's all celebrity gossip crap, which I don't really care. But yeah, it's like, what was the whole purpose of recording that conversation? Why didn't they release it? And, obviously they knew something was going to happen, so they wanted to have it in their back pocket. Okay, fine. but you released it when it wasn't even relevant anymore. And
Yeah.
but yeah, that stuff is just ridiculous. And then of course, they're like they do that, but then they deride paparazzi, which those are pretty much vile human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're trying to make a living, and all
so are child pornographers.
but but running out there and shoving cameras into people's faces and jumping over fences to get a picture of Jennifer Aniston in a bikini and stuff.
I still think paparazzis are responsible for Princess Diana's death.
Yeah, they had to. They said they had to try to outrun them and things like that. And
there's a lot of weird things about that. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. I mean, we definitely live in interesting times. We'll have to continue this discussion. I know your wife's probably going to be back soon. We're at 35 minutes, so let's go ahead and wrap it up, and then we can continue this. It's definitely an ongoing thing, and I'm sure that we haven't heard the last of Peter Thiel and his personal vendetta against Nick Denton and some of the other former people from Gawker. And I said this last week in what was a show that was sort of dedicated to this. A lot of great journalists got their start there, and a lot of great journalists still work there. And you can not like certain things, but it's important to have as much independent news as possible. So I'm glad that it's going to live on. I'm very curious to see what happens with it. Matt, always such a pleasure. Tell everybody out there where they can find you, and we'll look forward to next week.
All right. Well, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Woodstock, W00DSTOK. That's pretty much it.
All right. Well, that's it for another great episode. We'll be back next week with Chopping It Up with Matt and Sharona. That will be, I guess, episode 5. I'm not. Or is this episode 4 or 3?
This is 3.
Is it? Oh Lord, I need sleep. All right, we'll take another quick break. When we come back, more Back Talk with Sharona. So stay tuned in. All right, welcome back. Shout out to Matt, my buddy Matt Wood, Chopping It Up with Matt and Sharona. One of my favorite things right now. I always learn something from Matt, and he's a great guy, and so I'm very happy that we're doing this series talking about different things. It started out. And we do talk about politics, and we're going to continue to talk about politics, but there are a lot of things going on that deserve attention and mention, and the privacy thing is near and dear to my heart, and so I'm glad that Matt shares some similar concerns, and he has the expertise to talk about it and to bring certain things to our attention, and we'll have to keep that on the list. It's definitely a thing. Big news announced. If you guys listen to this cast or the Down and Dirty podcast, that we only did one this week. It's been a very, very, very busy week for me, so wasn't able to do another one. We'll definitely do at least one, if not 2, next week. Excuse me. And by the way, some of our future topics of an interesting thing. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm going to, but there was a podcast with Richard Deitch, who writes for a media journalist for Sports Illustrated, and there was a podcast, and they talked about the swimsuit issue, and I was very interested to find out that Peter King was against it and wanted to axe that. So we're going to add that. That's going to be on our list, one of our topics next week. Something else, and I'm going to touch upon Amy Schumer, but we're going to talk about comedy and women and what's going on in comedy right now. We're going to continue our discussion regarding Amy Schumer, who I took to task a little bit yesterday and already this morning. Another comedian, Sarah Beninkus. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I'll have to jump on YouTube and make sure that I do that. But she wrote a very great article. It was over at Medium. I found it over at medium.com, where she responded to a troll who called her fat and basically said asked her why she'd gained so much weight and said that she was ineffable, I suppose. That great defining characteristic. If you're not affable, apparently you're not worth anything to some people, particularly men. But some women have that. I see some women out here fat shaming as well. It's disgusting. It really makes my blood boil. But she wrote a great article, Why Am I So Fat? And there's so many great things in there. I said this on Twitter yesterday. As women start to tell their stories and start to share their journeys, we find that we have a lot in common, and there are a lot of similarities. And I could relate to her story so much because she wrote in there about a relationship that she had with a service member, a guy who was in the service, and I share a similar story too. So we'll talk about that and comedy and what's going on in comedy. Of course, I've talked about Louis C.K. before on this show, and the situation with him. So we'll talk about that. And because of some technical issues, I'm hoping to get Coach Daniel Sehorn back on the show next week. There's some big changes at the University of Tennessee. He and I had a great discussion. Unfortunately, there were technical issues. We sat down on was it Tuesday night, I believe it was, and had a great conversation about that and about the Baylor situation, Kevin Sumlin, Chalk Talk, and we're still working on trying to get that audio resolved, but it's not looking good. So hopefully I can get him back on and we can have that discussion. I want to have Josh, my buddy Josh Taylor, on to talk about some things. And OJ Spivey, we haven't had him on in a while. We need to have him back on and talk about some things. So there's a lot going on. So far, those are the things that I have on my list. If you have a topic that you want me to weigh in on, just hit me up out there in Twitter sphere, Sports by Sharona on Twitter. You can follow me. I did open up my Instagram account, Sharona Sports, Instagram and Snapchat. And I do Facebook, but I don't. I probably have unread messages and definitely have unread notifications. So I'm not a good follow on. So sorry about that. But big news today. We talked about the Baylor situation in Ken Starr. Ken Starr is resigning from Baylor now. Infamously, he was involved in basically the cover-up regarding their mishandling of sexual assault and rapes involving some of their athletes. He was I'm air quoting, quote unquote, demoted from his position as one of the higher ups involved in that, and was going to be just teaching in their law school. And I shared my distaste and discomfort with that because I did not want him teaching a new era of lawyers, that these things are acceptable or okay. And we still have issues in the legal community. Believe me, we still have issues in the legal community with these things. And so, it's, I think times they are a-changing. We're starting to see progress, but as they say, justice does not operate quickly, and progress is slow. And Fortunately, we have people speaking up and speaking out and no longer willing to accept the status quo, and that's why we're starting to see change. You don't see change without. They say that the squeaky wheel gets, or the grease, and but you definitely pay a price when you speak up and speak out about these things, and not just as victims but as advocates. It. Well, we don't have time to discuss that aspect of it. We'll talk about that when we talk about women in comedy and all of that. But Amy Schumer is it's an interesting thing, and we're going to run out of time and not really get to talk about Juanita Broderick and delve on that and give that the attention that it deserves. So we're going to be talking about that as well. I don't think that women should be punished for the things that the men in their life do, that their husbands do, that their boyfriends do. But there does come a time when what you stand for is important, and it's in that arena, it's in that kind of discussion that we're going to talk about Juanita Broderick and Hillary Clinton, and I'll speak to it from my point of view as someone who is a survivor and who advocates for victims, and who is politically aware and pays attention. And how do you reconcile being me being who I am, and look at Bill Clinton, all the allegations against him, and vote for Hillary Clinton? And I think that that's a real issue, and it's a real discussion that we need to have, and we're going to have it, because what Juanita Broderick has been very consistent in what she, in a lot of ways. Now, in some ways not, because of the affidavit that she did sign. But we'll go into more detail with that, and we'll talk about the situation in comedy and with Amy Schumer. You listen, I'm not holding her responsible for what Kurt Metzger, however you pronounce this, I'm not holding her necessarily responsible for that, but I'm asking her why she employed this man, and why, as an advocate and a survivor and a woman who cares about rape and violence against women, why I should care about her or her work when she openly calls this man a friend and employs him knowing who and what she is. How can she ask me to support her or support her work when she does that? So we'll talk some more about that, and it's these things are important, and it's we live in interesting times, and I'm sure that there will be some more that will come out about Ryan and his situation, and what do we think about that? And it's terribly unfortunate, and and obviously there are some bad things that happened. We're still finding out, what that was all about. But isn't it interesting that so many people are defending, saying, oh, kids as guys being guys, when they're out doing all of this, and you see the women getting slammed for not putting their hands over their hearts, for not smiling. That's an ongoing discussion that we'll have as well. So I thank you for listening. That's pretty much it for today. Shout out, by the way, to Doug Moore, who joined me in our first hour talking fantasy football. It was great to chit chat with him. He and I both write for Inside the Pylon. some more Inside the Pylon guys on to introduce themselves and talk about some things. Also to Matt, my buddy Matt, a shout out to him as always for the great chit chat. Happy Friday! I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned in. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona.